Good morning, folks. Thank you for joining us on this, I would say, fine November day, but it is truly miserable here. So I'm not going to claim that it's anything other than that. So we'll just give everyone a minute or two to get settled. The numbers are still going up, which is always nice to see some folks joining us and here to listen to what we've got to say this morning. So I'm Tony Stevenson. I'll be presenting Self-Assessment Made Simple. I know that no one else will care about this on this webinar, but I just want to apologise for the slight formatting problem on the first slide. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, especially when it's your slide. So there should be some nice gaps between there and it look a little less cluttered, but it won't affect the quality of the webinar that we are about to deliver. So on we go. A little bit of housekeeping and agenda before we get into the session. So the agenda today, we'll cover a little bit of housekeeping and then we will do our intros. We will do some scene setting, just a little bit of background and context on what's going on for today's topic. Then we will dive into the sort of live session of myself, Gareth and Steve. We hopefully will get an opportunity to take some Q&As. And then for those of you that would like to stick around at the end, we will have a FreeAgent demo. So we've got people on the webinar who are partners of FreeAgent, and we've got people on the webinar who are not partners of FreeAgent yet. So the webinar is designed predominantly for those of you that either haven't seen FreeAgent for a while, or the demo is designed for those of you that haven't seen FreeAgent for a while or haven't seen it before. So if you have, then you're able to stick around. You're able to drop off at that point if you're comfortable with FreeAgent, and if not, if you'd like to take 5-10 minutes having a look at it, then you're more than welcome to. And we find that works best for our attendees. So next slide, a bit of housekeeping. So yes, today's session will be recorded. You don't need to worry about that. You will get a recording sent out to you. The recording will also be available on the FreeAgent website. I know that there will be people joining late, and then there will be people joining having to leave early. So we will no doubt get this question at some point through the session, which is not the end of the world. But yeah, just so you know, today's session will be recorded and you'll get a copy of it. So Q&A. So we've got a Q&A section. So if you want to ask a specific question of our team, so we've got the wonderful Robbie Lang on today, who is going to be fielding any questions that we've got as we go through. So if you want a specific question answered about something, then pop it in the Q&A. And the reason for that is because it can get lost. The chat can get quite busy, and we can get questions get lost in there. And it also allows us to kind of collate them all up, and then we can field them at the end if there are any ones that we think add value to the session and will be useful for other listeners to listen to us debate. If you want to just chat amongst yourselves, then by all means you can do that. But my suggestion would be to use the attendee chat function. So if you want to just pop in there where you were dialing in from today, I see a few people have obviously been on webinars with me before. Yeah, York, sunny Southport, hi Tony. I'm sure that Claire will be on here somewhere, and we'll hear from her because I've never done a webinar that Claire Kendall didn't join. So polite and respectful policy. I always feel a little bit sad about having to say this one, but it is necessary. So we operate a polite and respectful policy. If you have turned up spoiling for a fight and feel the need to start chucking digital rocks around in the chat, then we'll ask you to stop. And if you don't stop, then we'll ask you to leave. We won't ask you to leave, we'll just kick you out, because it's the digital equivalent of making a lot of noise in the cinema, right? By all means, ask questions, but we're all here to learn. We're all here to further our knowledge and collaborate. And it has only happened once, but we do like to flag it. And please participate in the polls. So there'll be 3 or 4 polls as we run through, very light touch. There'll be good opportunities for everybody to say, do you know what? Yeah, I'm really pleased about what you were talking about today, and I'd really like to get in touch with somebody from FreeAgent. There'll be a couple of interest polls in there as well, just to gather people's thoughts and opinions on what's going on in the world that we operate in. But yeah, please do participate, and there'll be no pressure either way for whatever you decide to participate. But there'll be 3 or 4 of those as we run through, but they're low impact. Cool. So today's session is CPD certified, so we'll run for about an hour. So you'll get 1 CPD point. How do you collect the CPD point? So you'll have a link within the email that is sent out to you afterwards, and that link will contain a little kind of click through, and then you click through to it, and it says, did you watch the webinar, etc. You click yes, and then it will forward you out your certificate. And obviously there's no charge for that, just a nice little bonus. Everything we do at FreeAgent now is CPD accredited, which is cool. So now, without further ado, I'm going to ask our wonderful panelists to introduce themselves. So we're very lucky today. We've got two titans of the cloud accounting industry. First of all, I'm going to throw over to Gareth. So Gareth, if you could introduce yourself, give us a little bit of your backstory, and just get to know the folks today, I'd be much appreciated.
Thanks a lot, Tony. Hi, everybody. Yeah, thanks very much for having me on the webinar. Really pleased to be here. I'm an accountant. I've been in practice since 2003. 13 years of those have been within my own practice up until last year. And I was calculating before that I've been through 20 different self-assessment cycles now, the full cycle there. So plenty of experience in that respect. In 2020, I started to build software for my practice called Xenon Connect, which we've since rolled out to other practices. And it's essentially looking at the data quality of your bookkeeping or your client's bookkeeping and helping you to detect issues which you can then fix in a timely manner. I'm also from Wrexham. I have children, so therefore I must obviously like football.
And your best mates are Ryan Reynolds?
Of course.
Yeah. Excellent. For some reason or other, which is much to my wife's chagrin, and I'm sure that this will get good laughs within the chat group, the guy in my local chippy is convinced that I look just like Ryan Reynolds. And every time I go in there, he refers to me as Ryan Reynolds. All right, Ryan, how are you doing? To which I reply, yes, thank you very much, with a great big smile, because he is indeed a handsome man. So yeah, it upsets my wife terribly because she's a massive Ryan Reynolds fan and doesn't think I look anything like him, which in all honesty, I'm not convinced that I do either, but still, I will take it. So yeah, Steve's there like... on the flip side, I also got told once that I look like Wayne Rooney, so... and that was by my wife last week. So, you take what you can get, right? And on that note, Steve, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself as well, please, mate.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Steve Cox. I look nothing like Ryan Reynolds, more like Deadpool, I should imagine, with my haircut. So I'm the Business Intelligence Director for Iris Software Group. I've been working with Iris now for 22 years, so 22 different self-assessment cycles I've been through because I'm an accountant myself and do tax returns and accounts for family and friends as well, so still keep my hand in. My role at Iris has changed throughout the years. I've done product, I've done development, I've done a bit of marketing, had the lofty title of Chief Evangelist, story for another time. But my whole role at the moment is looking at kind of what's going on with the accountancy market and other markets, not just here in the UK, but also globally, but to take that information and to help accountants, bookkeepers and practitioners to further their own strategies, but also to help align with Iris as to what's going on there.
Perfect. Thank you very much. As I said, very lucky to have our guests today. Can bring a real technology slash real world practical ideas and experiences from the coalface as well. So I'm sure that there'll be one or two of you that will have tuned in, possibly mistakenly, for a repeat of a webinar that I've delivered, having not been suitably put off the first time, but I shall introduce myself anyway. So my name's Tony Stevenson. I am the Senior Digital Enablement Manager at FreeAgent. A bit like Steve, I've had a bunch of different sort of roles in the background. So the first 10 years of my career I spent in practice and industry, took my ACA along the way. I was a tax guy, predominantly corporate tax, but did dabble in other bits and pieces as well. Worked in a Big Four and then industry, and then a small medium-sized firm, I think is the best description of them. And then I've been in the software world now for actually crazily longer than I was in the accounting world, even though I still in my brain think of myself as a relative newbie. My heartland for the technology world has always been implementation, but I've done a bunch of different roles in partnerships, in sales, and right now I kind of do a bunch of different stuff at FreeAgent, head up the sort of commercial side of the practice integrations offering, and you could kind of broadly bring the rest of it through into sort of bringing the practice angle into FreeAgent, because of my background in the practice space. So I will be the host today, and we'll dive right into it. So first up, just a little bit about us. So for anyone that's not familiar with FreeAgent and sort of thinks maybe where we come from, so essentially we are accounting or bookkeeping software. We've got around about 200,000, not quite 200,000 active users within the UK. We are predominantly UK, we're only UK focused, and we are recognised repeatedly for our unrivaled support. Our mobile app is a real point of difference for us as well. I had a really interesting conversation with Linda Owen yesterday about how useful it is as a sort of way of getting people onto buzzing about the whole digital accounting thing. And we are owned by the NatWest Group. So we have been since 2018. What does that mean? So that means that FreeAgent you can have for free if you have got a NatWest Group business banking relationship. So NatWest, Royal Bank of Scotland, Ulster Bank, or Metal. So the core app is free, so some add-ons may be chargeable. We've got a couple of chargeable add-ons in there that you can choose to use or not. And we are fully recognised as MTD compatible. We also are delighted to have taken home the friendliest software of the year at the Luca Awards 2 weeks ago as well. That's the third time we've won it in a row, and something that we are not quietly very proud of. It's just, we use it as a real measure of people liking to do business with FreeAgent. So as I said, if you're interested in speaking to somebody about FreeAgent, then jump in here. So if you're an accountant or bookkeeper in practice and would like to find out more about becoming a FreeAgent partner, then you can hit yes, you can hit no, or you can hit I'm already a FreeAgent partner, as I said. If you hit yes, that means somebody from FreeAgent will get in touch with you for an obligation conversation to see if there's something we can do to help with your small and your micro clients. So while this poll runs, I'll just sort of continue on from my thread previously. So the very brief potted history of FreeAgent in terms of where we sit within the market. So we started very much as a contractor and freelancer product, and over time we've kind of grown into the micro space. So your 5 to 10 employee businesses, and as we continue on, we're looking to put in some features that just plug some of the gaps with the slightly larger businesses, like never the M of SME, but 20, 30 person businesses, and we do have them that use FreeAgent. So ever faster, it's becoming a really cost-effective way to manage the bulk of the clients that you have on in a typical practice, those sort of micros to smalls, because of the cost advantage of the NatWest relationship. Just give a few more seconds to let this one run, and then we shall jump on to the next page. If you're not sure at this moment, then there will be more opportunities within the future to say, yes, I am keen. Numbers are still moving, so I'll just give a few more seconds. Let's say you'll have another opportunity in the future if you're not sure at this stage and you'd like to hear what we've got to say. Cool. So, setting the scene. Today we're talking about kind of self-assessment and that area and the technology that supports making those filings, and the technology that can support running your practice in a way that allows you to do this stuff easier than we have typically enjoyed being able to do it in the past. So Steve is, as he says quite openly, very keen on the data. I was going to say data nerd, but I won't say data nerd. He just loves getting into the data, and he pulls out some fantastically interesting stuff. So I asked him if he would very kindly do the same again, as he did for this webinar last year, and pull us out some stats on how filing looks, and and we can run some commentary on it. So self-assessment filing volumes. So you'll see at the top we've got these this graph that shows these green peaks. And then we're also showing the sub peak underneath there, which is essentially showing the total kind of filing returns that are done in the different parts through the year. So unfortunately, it's a bit blurred out and a bit small. You can't see, but they're the dates. You can see the obvious peak there, and in these the dark green line is the January crush. And obviously that's based on millions of tax returns, so a small dip in those numbers is not necessarily perceptible. But Steve, do you want to talk us through your observations on this first graph?
Yeah, certainly. So as you can see, you've got 6 years worth of filings here, and as you just described, Tony, the light green is showing the cumulative amount of filings that's going through third parties. And just to explain what that means. A third party means any piece of software that has sent a filing through to HMRC that has not come through their government gateway. Majority of those are going to be coming from accountants and bookkeepers. So this is purely just looking at those that have been filed through those third parties. Now, what you can see across this is a slow trend upwards in the overall volume across the years. It is marginal, but we are talking about millions here of filings that are going through. So as an example, in last tax year, what we actually saw was 6.74 million tax returns going through by January the 31st. Now, that kind of shows that there is a trend increasing as the overall volume increases. But as you were just describing, Tony, that dark grey line that's going through is showing the monthly filings. And clearly, the peak is always going to be January. Now, the two middle peaks that you can see in there in the middle of the chart are when we had COVID and there was a filing extension. So therefore, some of that January crush went into February. But what we have seen is that the pattern kind of continues. You look at these, it kind of looks like a bit of a heartbeat almost as to kind of what's going through. But what we are seeing is that you can't see it hugely in this graph, but there's a bit more of a trend where we're seeing during the year a slightly higher volume than average than what we'd seen over the previous years. Looking at the chart underneath, we're actually looking at the year-on-year filings by month. And this is just looking at the difference between the last tax year compared to the prior tax year. And what you can see here is that probably for the first kind of like 8 to 9 months, we're actually doing more filings per month going through from April through to around December. On average, is higher by around 20,000 filings a month more than what we saw the prior tax year. And then in January, we actually saw a reduction of around 90 to 95,000 tax returns being filed in January in comparison. What does that mean? Well, actually, I think it's a really positive sign. Normally, when you see a graph going downwards, everyone gets worried. But in this respect, this kind of shows that we're seeing filings being done earlier. And that means that either we're getting client information early and we're filing ahead of schedule, or actually we're getting more productive and therefore we're being able to do this a lot quicker than we've ever done. Or there's always the third one where everyone had such a horrible January, they don't want to live through it again, so they've done it much earlier anyway. So it does kind of hint that we're seeing a slightly positive kind of almost like green shoot here to see that we're starting to get away a little bit from the January crush. Now, I do say that with a pinch of salt because that's only 100,000 different year on year. When you think that actually in January, we generally file 3 million tax returns in that 1 month alone. So it's a small bit of good news, but it's good news nonetheless.
Indeed, and if that trend continues, it won't take too long for us to see, and you would expect, I guess, with the advent of MTD for income tax, that that is going to push that in that direction, right? We're moving away from this crush and we're moving more towards a sort of blended, well, the information's there earlier rather than us being kind of bottlenecked by having to collect client data and them not bringing the data in, and there's still the things that we run through here. So these graphs, I will pull out the figures on them. So essentially, the dark green is paper filings, and as you can see, both in terms of percentages, where we started here in 2018, we had nearly 700,000, and that was about 6% of overall. That's pretty much halved now to 338,000 in 2022, 2023, and that's dropped to 2.9%, and that's continuing to drop year on year in terms of the paper filings, which is good news, right? And then the orange band is people filing directly to HMRC online, and then the blue band is people filing through third-party filings online, right? So if you're looking at the absolute numbers, then the orange has risen, but so has the blue as well. So that means that there are more people filing through online third-party filings, which we predominantly would expect to be advisors, but not 100% of the case. There are obviously a lot of users that use cloud accounting software directly rather than through the accounting channel. But obviously it has increased the number of businesses this year because that line has gone up. The overall percentage has gone down, but the absolute number has gone up from a sort of from a third-party filing perspective. And we got into a little bit of why we thought this might be the case. One of the conclusions that we reached was potentially that there was quite a lot of businesses that didn't make it through the COVID channel, through the COVID time, sorry, and that actually there was then a whole bunch of new businesses that were born out of that time through people kind of taking up side hustles and starting sort of more less kind of predominantly businesses, that would be their first income and, something that was on the side. And that actually, as those immature businesses start to mature and grow and stick around, then, you would expect probably that those numbers would go from being orange into the blue slightly more. So yeah, so it's an interesting trend. So the overall numbers are up and the proportions are slightly down on the previous year in terms of what people were doing with their varying different ones. In the interest of time, this one, Steve, if you want to talk us through this one, I like this graph. I think this just goes to show sort of how things are rocking and rolling. This shows the full year. Apologies, the date format hasn't come through at the bottom, but you can see essentially the tracking for a year, and the green is software and advisors, and blue is HMRC and direct, or third party, sorry, rather than advisors. But yeah, if you want to talk us through this graph, Nick, we'll get into it.
Indeed. I mean, this goes from April 23 through to March 24 for the timeline from left to right on this. And what this kind of shows is that the bulk of filings come through HMRC at the beginning of the tax year and also at post the filing window. So what we can see here is that tiny little spike that kind of goes onto the right-hand side is where we see January. So we're seeing over 50% of the filings are going through from third parties. But then post that point, amendments or late filings seem to predominantly be going through HMRC direct. So therefore, good news, that shows that the accountants are being on time with their filings more often than individuals, which, let's be honest, that's probably the aim of the game for most accountants. But the interesting bit for me is that this, again, we're seeing this trend throughout the year where there is a more higher proportion of filings being done by accountants here. So this kind of like the brow of the hill, if you like, in the graph. It goes to show that, again, more is being done through third-party software, aka accountants and bookkeepers, than what we've seen previously. Now, the thing with all of this to bear in mind is that this is all looking at an annual filing. So this is clearly showing blue for HMRC direct versus third parties. Now, this could continue to stay like this ultimately as a trend. And when we go back and look at this year on year, kind of the peaks change slightly, the brow of the hill gets a little bit lower. So we are seeing that improve. The question starts to become, what happens going forwards? And I know that we're going to cover this a little bit later on around kind of what happens with MTD, because actually, I think we're going to see quite a phenomenal change in some of these statistics.
Indeed. Right. So let's get into our, I'm going to skip this next slide. Let's get into our panel discussion. So the first question that we wanted to kind of address was, why do we think we are still experiencing the January crush? We got into it a little bit, but Gareth, I'm going to go to you first, my friend, as you have sat very patiently waiting for me and Steve to keep yabbering on about the data that we discovered yesterday. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this topic?
I mean, there's so many factors, aren't there, involved, and it'll be different from practice to practice and from client to client as well. One big one for me is that from past experience, there's a subset of clients that's often quite large that won't do anything until they have to do something urgently. It's that if you set the deadline to 6 months after 5th of April, then the crush would just be obviously 6 months after rather than the 9 months after, wouldn't it? Yeah. So it's that deadline is a big one for me. Don't know if you'd agree, Steve.
I completely agree. It's, as with anything like this, it's always heavily deadline driven. And I've got to be honest, I'm probably one of those people as well, right? I'm one of those that at school you kind of cram it towards the exam rather than kind of spreading it out. Yeah. So I'm not one to talk on that, but it does feel that it is everyone's busy doing their business. They didn't get into business to pay HMRC taxes. Anyone that did probably works for HMRC. So it's almost like a side piece that people just forget about and then go, oh yeah, I've only got a couple of weeks to go. Probably should go do something about it. The other thing I also wonder is how many people really do anything during the year to kind of prepare for this until they start to get the HMRC reminders. So obviously from an income tax point of view, I get a letter from HMRC. And I've got to be honest, when I got my first one in October, that's when I kind of went, oh yeah, that's probably a good point. I should be going and pulling through all of my filings and ready for it. So it does feel that it's a back of a mind piece to do it early, unless you're super proactive and prepared for it.
I guess you're being given the chance to do that, right? So that's what folks do. I think that still now the collection of data is still a problem. So we go out and ask our accounting audience every year, you know, like a bunch of questions around, you know, how they're feeling about their world. And one of the questions that we ask is like, what's the thing that you dislike the most about your job? And every single time it comes back with collecting data from clients, right? So, you know, it's not easy. We haven't fixed that, but there are tools out there that can help with that. So from a FreeAgent perspective, we've got Smart Capture, which you can take a photo of in the app, and then it will drag some of the data off, and it will allow you to create a bill or an expense. The bill is a new feature, by the way, and it will also automatically attach the receipt to a payment if it can find a match versus certain parameter. Free up to 10 captures, and then over that there's a small charge for it. If you want to go into that and really kind of apply that for like larger volumes and for more complicated clients, you could look at a tool like Dext, right? So Dext, it does the same thing, but they're just a more sophisticated offering for those slightly larger businesses, and we find some blend of those two tends to work quite well in the typical FreeAgent practice. So for me, I think the data collection piece is a real blocker in terms of, right, okay, we know that these tools exist and we've got bank feeds that we can drag the data into, but ultimately there are still a lot of businesses out there that haven't automated that process yet. Had a really interesting conversation yesterday with this lady called Linda, and she was saying that she started using data capture, and what she's found is that whilst there is still a bit of work in terms of checking things and making sure things are you know, where they need to be, in some instances, that actually what it's done, the runoff of that was that suddenly her clients have opened their eyes in terms of, oh, actually, I see why this is important now, because I can see it in the software, and now suddenly I'm like, oh, I can raise my invoices on this. I'm using this app anyway, so I might as well do this, which you never really considered the sort of like the secondary and tertiary behavioural changes that would come with just having the ability to be able to take a photo of a receipt, and then that's it done. You can stick it in your file and, you know, leave it in the back of a cupboard for 7 years until the need for it to be there expires. So, yeah, any other thoughts on technology that might help to move this stuff forward, or any other tips?
I do think there's to your point you were just saying, there's definitely a point around visibility of data as well, right?
Yeah.
So with a lot of these things, it's a lot of this data that we need is receipts, right, or invoices. Heaven forbid it's paper-based, right? So some of it is a case of, I don't know about anybody else, but when you get a receipt, goes straight in the pocket or gets filed away, and you don't ever see it again until the point where you go, do I need it? Whereas taking a photo of it creates it more visibly, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that's a good point, actually. This was something that we purchased here for this reason, or actually this is a supplier we've used loads, and look how much we've spent with them, and so on and so forth. And it starts to then bubble up with questions. So utilising technology definitely creates data visibility, and once you've got the visibility of it and you can see kind of what's going on, you're getting insights from it, and then the natural human mind is then becoming inquisitive about it, and then you do an action off the back of it, right? So data to insights to actions is something that's really important. If you don't have it at the front end, then you're not going to get the others, so therefore you can't make a change or make a decision off the back of it. I do wonder, though, whether there is an element of psychology to it as well. I know this is veering away from the technology piece, but if you just think about the point in the year where the big filings are, right? So October is the end of the paper filing piece. So anyone who's proactive that wants to send it in via paper or has kind of done that route year in, year out and wants to continue, they know their deadline. Well, I'd say you've then obviously October, you've got go into November, you've got an element of Halloween, thinking about kind of like what's going on in the year, right? Then you've kind of got the whole Thanksgiving bit, if you're American, also celebrating that. There's a number of other holidays. And then you've got Christmas, right? No one really wants to be doing anything to do with tax, apart from obviously certain accountants, in that period and leading up to it. And then you've got the New Year's. There's a load of different bits in the tail end of the year that go on in our own personal lives that probably prevent us from being proactive in this environment. And then it's only when you get to January when, let's be honest, what else is everybody doing other than probably going on a diet or cutting out the alcohol to be good and a new fitness regime, where they're probably then going, well, I've got a bit of time to now start looking at what do I need to do with my business, new year, new start. First thing to do is tax. So there was in the attendee comments, actually, Fuzzy, I think, mentioned it, was saying, I wish that they would bring it 2 months forwards. I actually think it's a really good idea from an HMRC deadline point of view, because then accountants might actually get a nice break, and they wouldn't have such a January rush. But with the advent of MTD coming along and quarterly filing, obviously that's HMRC's way around it. So I think that psychology is probably something to bear in mind as well.
Indeed.
There are a load of tools out there, and I think that Gareth can probably cover off more than me on some of the data health bits, on what tools can be used during the year to improve that. But I do think that data visibility is important.
Indeed, indeed. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip to the next question. Which you kind of covered a little bit here, but challenges with data collection and bookkeeping. Now, this is going to lead us into some of your stuff, Gareth, and your world. So, if you want to start us on some of this stuff, that would be greatly appreciated.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, in terms of data collection and bookkeeping, I guess we've got to differentiate between a sole trader that isn't VAT registered and one that is currently as well. There's no requirement for a non-VAT registered firm of the actual business owner themselves to do any bookkeeping throughout the year. Is that obviously best practice is that we want them to log in to have that visibility for management accounts purposes as well, to get those meaningful figures. But there's nothing in terms of compliance that means they have to log in until the end of January if they don't want to get this submitted. And so that also means that there's nothing that's pushing them to get those records to their accountant early unless the accountant is chasing them. So I think there's a big differentiation between the difficulty in getting records for non-VAT registered business owners compared to registered VAT business owners who will have already done the bulk of the bookkeeping themselves or have passed it on to a bookkeeper or accountant to do those VAT reviews throughout the year. Now, obviously, as we're coming into MTD for income tax as well, that will hopefully bring more of those non-VAT registered clients into the scope of having to log in more often to get that bookkeeping front-ended at the start of the year or even throughout the actual year of accounts that they're preparing as well. So that will start to level off that actual work throughout the year rather than just that bookend at the end.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's going to be the big behavioural change, right? I bring my box of receipts in January. You charge me however much it is to put my tax return together. I can't do that anymore. And I'm going to try and bring it in 4 times a year. Probably not going to succeed. Probably not going to like the bill that comes with like the pick up and put down of it 4 times a year, because you can't just. It's not 1/4 of the work doing it 4 times a year, right? It's probably 2/3 again extra of the work, double the amount of work to pick it up, put it down, and process those receipts manually. So, and it'll still have to go into some form of software. Steve, your thoughts on this stuff, mate?
I completely agree, right? That it's the when do you need to go and look at the data, to Gareth's point, is, to be honest, you're probably just using it for invoices and purchases and things like that. At which point in the year are you going to be going in there and going, okay, well, where have I got for my tax? Unless there's a point where you're looking at how much money can I take out of the business for either a large purchase or for a dividend or something like that. So there's always got to be a push in some regards for someone to go into that. Yeah. Now, as in our personal lives, obviously we all use tech. Everybody's getting more FA with smartphones and the apps and things like that. I do think that we're starting to see a bit of a shift towards people being more proactive going into that. I mean, believe it or not, I'm old enough to remember when the only way you could check your bank balance was to go into the bank with a book and they'd print onto the book to tell you the balance. Now, obviously, you're getting daily alerts on your phone, right? So things have changed.
You've still got no money.
Exactly. So they've still got no money. It's always a zero. So I do think that is definitely changing when it comes to the collection of the data and the bookkeeping. And there are a number of people out there who still don't do their proper record keeping. Right? It is very much a case of they're on the fly. I mean, I've good examples of like people who are in like in the trade for decorators, plumbers, and builders. My dad used to be a plumber, so I know this firsthand from him that you'd do a job and you'd go, right, oh, actually, I need this part. I'd go off and buy it, and then ultimately the receipt just goes in the van, and it doesn't get anything done with it until a point where the van needs a clean, and then the records come out, right? Now, at least, with the receipt capture and things like that, obviously you can go and take a photo of it straight away. From an expenses point of view, obviously we do the same thing. I think there is another element here that also is leading into people doing more digitally, and it sounds terrible, but I actually think that a lot of the companies who provide the receipts in general are starting to cut costs on some of the way that they do receipts. And then probably you've all had this, go into a shop, and when you put it all through and you've paid, it goes, do you want a receipt, yes or no? Now, if you're in a rush, it's to just walk away and it's an automatic no, right? And even when you say yes, let's be honest, the printout that comes is probably only going to last for 3 months before that ink's faded and gone, because it's all the cost-cutting exercise. I know that sounds terrible, but I do think that there's an element for it, which is why it's so important to go and capture the receipts early. From a HMRC's requirements point of view, do you still need a paper copy? No. Once it's been digitized, you don't need a paper copy. So almost immortalize it as early as possible. Otherwise, when you do go and take a photo of it and it's fading and you can't read what it is, it's going to become a problem. So I do think there are challenges, and there are lots of things that are happening that will drive people more digitally.
I think there's some behavioural cut-off as well with this, that it's easy to assume when you kind of know how basic bookkeeping works that like business owners and clients know how basic bookkeeping works, and actually that is the fundamental kind of thing that we need to get over is actually they don't really understand this. It's not bookkeeping to them. It's an action that I need to take as a part of my business, right? So what we experienced was at FreeAgent, we did some user research many years ago, and what we do is present our banking section to a user and ask them how they felt about it. And this was before we had our AI in that helped to categorize transactions. And they described what they saw as the red wall of death, which was basically all the transactions in red with no real guidance as to what to do with those transactions, or even what the fundamental underlying task was that they were trying to achieve, which was categorize them and then put the right VAT on them, because they don't really understand why that's important. And it makes more sense when you show a set of accounts, but often as a sole trader, it's just here's your tax bill. You don't necessarily need to produce a P&L like you do, but you don't necessarily need to put it in front of them or file it with Companies House like you do with limited company, right? So we built a couple of different ways of dealing with this, which was to essentially put an algorithm into FreeAgent that looks at past behavior and other people's behavior and then works out where these things need to go, so that when folks were logging in, and we realized that actually that first interaction with quote unquote the red wall of death was putting off a lot of people because they didn't really know where to go. So once the machine started doing this and they could see the logic and they were like, oh, that's got a category next to it, I understand that. Maybe I still don't quite understand why I'm doing it, but I can see that it's important because this one doesn't. But I can follow the logic because I know I can put that best, and it doesn't necessarily need to go to general expenses or sundry. And that starts to then capture that behavior of, as you talked about, Gareth, that ongoing bookkeeping, that not necessarily daily, not necessarily weekly, but certainly like I've looked at this 2 or 3, 4 or 5 times across the course of a year, and maybe I wanted to have some rough idea. And once they get it and they can see, I can actually see how much money I've made, and have a better idea about how much tax I might be paying. And then it's then you get that question of like, oh, actually, I could put that training course in there, which is 10 grand, but that's going to bump my tax bill down by a bit. So actually, that's that I can do that now rather than see the benefit in a year's time if I did it 2 weeks later because it spanned the end of the tax year, or those types of things. So leaning on your cloud accounting tools, bank feeds, and some of the algorithms and data capture opportunities starts to build up this picture of a front-loaded set of bookkeeping that's a bit more accurate and a bit more engaged with your partners, which should help to ease that crush as you persuade them that this is something that can be done earlier, because there is a benefit to it, right? Which is interesting. So on to the next one, and Gareth, we're going to lead with you on this one because this is your baby. So we integrate with Xenon Connect. We've had a great partnership with you guys this year, hence why Gareth's on the webinar. And this is the reason that Xenon Connect exists, right? Is data health, essentially, that bridging that gap between what's been done in the bookkeeping software and knowing that it's right and spotting trends and things. So in terms of the data health stuff, like talk us through. And I know Gareth well enough to know that he's an extremely modest chap, so you can sell Xenon Connect as hard as you want, mate. It's a fantastic tool. There are others in the market, Expert and Dex Precision as well, but I would strongly urge you to have a look at Xenon, and you would talk us through how the data health challenges present in this field. And I'm sure Steve will be itching to have his say as well, because data is Steve, right? So
yeah, sure. Thanks, Tony. So I mean, I wanted to look at it in the context of the self-assessment, how Xenon can potentially help as well. And really, data quality, in my mind, is a bit of a hidden pitfall that doesn't get talked about in a meaningful way by accountancy practices and bookkeepers. So we all know that every self-assessment client is different in terms of complexity and number of transactions. So is it a small income and expenditure job, or is it a full set of accounts with balance sheet and so on? But our practice management solutions don't normally give any weight to the size and complexity of each accounts prep job. So they'll maybe say, okay, we've got 60 sets of accounts left to do before the end of January remaining. But each of those 60 sets of accounts can be massively different. And we all know that, but we don't quantify that difference. So in my mind, for those bookkeepers and accountants that have got clients that do the bookkeeping themselves or part of it, why not have a pre-year-end check-in to assess that data quality, so you can start a conversation early with a view to helping them to get that data quality up, so we're not leaving it until that December and January time. Because if we are leaving that conversation around data quality until January, then often that conversation never happens, because as accountants, we don't have the time to do it. We don't have the time to communicate what's wrong in the bookkeeping. We end up just fixing it and probably not charging for the fact that essentially we're completing the bookkeeping. So we suck up that additional work. We potentially don't bill for it. We've got no way of monetizing or communicating those issues, which is where Xenon comes in this respect, with regards to self-assessment, because you can produce a PDF health report that will be presented in terms that the client will understand, in terms of the 24 different error checks that we provide, whereby you can present this to them. You can say, well, I can't start your self-assessment tax return, those sets of accounts that I need to complete that, until you've looked at these items. Now, you can do it yourself, or you can ask us to do it, and we will obviously provide a quotation for that additional work. So it's that communication, it's being transparent what needs to be done, but it means that as a practice, you're not leaving money on the table correcting these issues yourself in your own time, at a time of the year where you're stressed out of your mind because you've got so much more to do as well. So yeah, in terms of what we offer every practice one free organization for life, and that'll stay there forever. So maybe it's your own practice FreeAgent account, for example, that you want to connect to Xenon, then connect that and that'll stay there forever. You get full use of it. Or maybe a juicy client you want to add there and see how it deals with it, then why not do that? And we're very cost effective after that. We go up in bands in terms of the pricing. So essentially it syncs the data with your bookkeeping package every night, and then it will produce an itemized checklist of specific transactions for you or your team members to review. And you've got that bird's eye view of all of your clients in one place. So as client managers and directors, often we don't have the oversight of where all of our clients are up to in terms of how complete the bookkeeping is and the data quality of that bookkeeping as well, which is where Xenon can help.
From a tactical perspective, I bet there's one of those health checks that you joke about internally as being the one that's always like, oh, that one's always the one that gets the attention. Like, so just give our users a couple of examples of like ones that commonly flag up that you really have an impact with the intervention.
Yeah, so we've got one called Bill or Direct, and you might not work out what that is straight from the payment from the description there, but essentially it's when the client or a team member that's perhaps less experienced goes into that bank reconciliation screen in the bookkeeping package and clicks OK and hits it as a spend item, that expense, that bank payment straight to an account's nominal code, an expense code, instead of putting it against the bill, which may or may not exist at that point in time. So obviously when that bill does eventually come onto the system, there's that duplication of the expense, the profit's understated because it's hit the P&L twice.
Twice, yeah.
And VAT returns are out of kilter. You're claiming back input VAT for that expense twice as well, potentially. That's a big one. There's other ones like just general tidy up ones, things like duplicate contacts. So if a supplier or customer's entered into the bookkeeping package with a slight spelling mistake, when it's been pushed in from whatever system, then you'll know that generally it creates a new contact record within the underlying bookkeeping package. And it can cause a bit of a mess working out which is the active record, which one's got the payment, has a different one got the invoice, and so on. Let's keep it tidy so we detect those duplicates or likely duplicates and allow you to then push that merge of contacts back in the package there. But there's so many I could talk about, but I don't want to sort of go on with a big sales pitch for Xenon. But get in touch if that's something of interest to you.
Yeah, I would urge you to. It's like I said, it's the missing piece of like, you're not flying blind then, right? And you're hopefully having less surprises when you're at that pinch point of like, oh, actually now, we've got a lot of work to do, and suddenly we realise that this whole thing is a disaster because they put everything to sales and duplicated every bill and all these types of things that happen. Or the favourite was paid the bill, amount hasn't come through the bank instantly, so went and created a transaction in the bank, then obviously that transaction arrives later of like, well, I've got duplicate manually added payments. So Steve, data health, thank you very much, Gareth, that was really insightful. Your thoughts, mate?
I think most people underestimate the power of that tidy up of the duplication that Gareth just talked about. That's phenomenal, right? Because this is something that hasn't been around for a long time. And then now suddenly you think you're talking like thousands of potential transactions, depending on the size of the business, that could go down from thousands to hundreds from trying to wade through all that data. So that's just potentially on one client. Then you run that across all your client base, and suddenly the amount of time you're going to save is phenomenal. And we know that in the world of accounting, time is money, right? So therefore, that is the most important part of all of it. I think that there's another part to it as well, which is we've talked for years around how accountants give away free advice, right? And part of that is because they can't monetize it, or there's nothing tangible to show off the end of it. It's very much a verbal advice that gets given. The power of things like Xenon Connect and stuff like that allow them to, one, get the data into the right kind of like cohorts, and also into the right health point to be able to then advise off the back of, because you're not wading through a huge amount of information, you're wading through the really important stuff to be able to talk to someone about it. So I think as people start thinking around, how do I do more than just compliance, then this is really good for those that want to move into kind of doing more advisory or value added work, because you can't do that without having correct data.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. Yes, don't get me wrong, it streamlines the whole self-assessment process massively because the data's right, and therefore you don't have to worry through it. And to Gareth's point, you're actually also being able to see a clearer view of what the volume of work that needs to be done is still to be done in that period. So there's a huge productivity benefit for it. But there's a long tail for that as well, for what can we then do to advise our clients on, and therefore be able to charge on the back of.
Indeed. I'm a big proponent of this, and I think that it is, we're in sometimes within the profession, like I use the example of doctors, and like you go see a doctor and they say to you, like, make sure that you get plenty of exercise and that you don't smoke and that you don't drink, and then you bump into the doctor at the pub and they're smoking and drinking and talking about having not done loads of exercise, right? And like as accountants, we're brilliant at giving our clients amazing advice based on the information that they've been able to give us, and hoping that it was present and correct. And actually, oftentimes, if we can take that same advice and use that within our own practices, that can really help to make sure that we're pricing correctly, which we all know is a big challenge, right? And we can make sure that we've got the right allocation across, our staff, and make sure that we are, as you said, able to give the best advice because the information is present, correct, and up to date, and we were able to do that at the time they need to. And then there's less of those conversations of like, I just bought a new van, and we're like, was it electric? No, those types of things that perhaps we could have intervened with and helped as our infinite wisdom as advisors and trusted confidants of our clients. So excellent. As ever with Tony, we're running a bit behind, so we're going to jump on to the next one. Practical considerations for the filing process. So if we can just hold that thought in our mind, and I'm going to skip on to this next slide, which is, I think, going to be one that becomes semi-famous, maybe in this form, maybe in a slightly different form. But so practical considerations for the filing process. And now it would be churlish of us not to mention MTD for income tax, because we know it's on the horizon. All the indications are that it's going ahead with the revised deadline of April 2026. Steve, do you want to just talk us through this little graph that we've got coming up?
Yeah, certainly. So, you know me, I love a bit of data. So I started to take a look at kind of, if you think about the green data that you can see here, the light green is the third-party filings over a period of a year. The dark blue is then the HMRC direct filings. So that's for the annual filings that would normally be done. Now, when MTD kicks in April 2026, there will be a year of transition, as is the case when the new legislation comes in, where you'll still be doing the annual filings for the previous tax period, whilst also doing the new quarterly filing for the new tax period. And that's what the red is representing here, as to the proportion and the amount of filings that are going to need to be done, as well as those annual submissions in the previous year. So the way that I've kind of looked at this is, yes, you're going to have to go and do 4 submissions through the year and then a final submission. And 4 is at a minimum, right? Now, you've got set into quarters, and over that you've got kind of like a spread over 2 months as to when you could go and do that filing for it. I mean, yes, there's a 30-day filing window at the end of it. So I've made an assumption and said, well, if you take the total amount of filings that need to be done, there's probably circa 80% of those will need to do some form of quarterly filing for MTD for ITSA. And that's what that red represents. 80% of the total amount of filings that need to be done being done in each of those quarters. Now, the two interesting bits on this is, one, there will be no HMRC direct option to file MTD for ITSA. It would all need to be done through third parties. Now, that can either be done by an accountant or bookkeeper, which I should imagine the majority of that is, or it will all be done direct through your own software, such as FreeAgent and so on and so forth. That's a huge amount of additional filings that need to be done. So all of those points we've just talked earlier about data health, about getting the data in, that's in a 3-month window now. And I think I saw in the comments someone saying that MTD is going to turn a mountain into 4 molehills.
Yes, I did like that, Fozzie. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, these are those 4 molehills, right? But the bit that scares me the most is that peak in January, when you've got your annual filings being sent through, as well as that quarterly submission at the same point. We all say January is busy enough as it is now. What happens when you add another 1 million or 2 million filings that need to be done at that same point? And I think a lot of people forget that during that year of transition, you're going to have double bubble work going on throughout that whole year. It's not just one period. It's quite a lot of work that's got to be done in a 12-month period.
And whilst obviously this graph will flatten over time, because the idea is that those red peaks will swallow up some of the green and blue work underneath it, and that, you know, that will front load the bookkeeping to a point where hopefully we should be sort of checking and clicking submit, right? And that's the longer term goal for digitizing the tax process. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this first year is going to be challenging, and we should be thinking about it sort of yesterday as something that we need to kind of get planned for. Gareth, your thoughts on this? It's the first time you've seen it, so your immediate reaction. Gareth reacts.
Yeah, sure. And I guess it's going down to the overall question of how can tech help. Now, FreeAgent in particular is a one-stop shop in terms of the bookkeeping, then flows through to the self-assessment that can be submitted, can't it, for the sole traders, for example. You can add that other income in there as well quite easily. So the question is, how many pieces of software are you using for the self-assessment process? Can you streamline that? Can you avoid the need to rekey in data from one package to another? Yep. And if you aren't rekeying it, how easy is it to get that into a format you can just import it into the next one? So if it's, you know, if you can flow straight through from the point of view of the client, maybe doing some of the bookkeeping, you doing some of it, then it gets reviewed, you do the VAT returns, you do NTD for income tax when that comes in as well. And then essentially, if all the data's in there in that one package, then it's a click of a button, isn't it, to get all these things done once it's been reviewed by the accountant or bookkeeper.
Yeah, because it doesn't get us away from the year-end filing, right? So I know that the HMRC have dropped the end of period statement. So it was 4 quarterlies, end of period statement, which was like a sum up for each income stream, and then the overall one. Dropped the end of period statement, but ultimately the end of period statement essentially reflected like tax adjustments and things that needed to be done to take you from counting profit to tax profit before you then push it into your final period. So whilst that form's disappeared, the work still exists, right? So we still got to make sure that our disallowables are disallowed, and that, you know, any claims that we need to make in terms of, you know, funny stuff that goes through is all done. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Make sure that you've streamlined your process, make sure you've given it advanced thought, make sure that your platform can cope with the funnies, and if it doesn't, then you need to have something that can, and that might mean that you have a sole piece of tax software that you filter in all of your bookkeeping stuff into centrally, you know, and it might be that you don't have that, and that you're using the individual ones on the platforms which are, you know, suitable for your different client needs. But we are running slightly behind, so I'm going to jump onto the polls now, but I'm sure there'll be a few people that has given a bit of food for thought for, and I do wonder whether this will come and take on cult status, this slide, Steve. So poll, one of the biggest pieces of UK tax legislation on the horizon is the next phase of making tax digital, MTD for income tax, which I think is going to be the name for it. which is scheduled to come in effective from April 2026. How confident are you that your practice business will be ready for these changes? So my understanding is that you just like click straight onto the screen. There was a couple of sort of people weren't quite sure how to, we were waiting for a pop-up. It should just be in the screen. You should just be able to click on the answer. So go for it.
I almost feel, Tony, you should have done this poll twice. Once before we showed
yes, you should. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, damn, yeah, that's,
see the impact of what's happened.
Indeed.
Just whilst people are answering that one, the thinking about that red peak, right? Gareth's absolutely right around making sure that the data's there. There's going to be filing that's going to be done directly through software such as FreeAgent. For practitioners and accountants that are joining us today, one of the big things that's probably really important is around deadlines, dates, and the workflow and the management of that. So those that don't use practice management, now's the time to probably start looking at that. I mean, Iris are the largest supplier to accountants and bookkeepers in the UK. We're the largest third-party filer, so that green line, a big chunk of that is Iris. So we get a lot of data in on this. Still a huge number of people that don't use practice management to manage all of those dates. So that's just in the normal kind of January crush. Then go on to then the whole piece of, well, now we've got these extra 4 molehills coming along as well. Keeping on top of all of that is going to be quite hard. So I would definitely suggest people start thinking about their practice management process and the way that they do all of the client checklists and ultimately the dates from it as well.
Yeah, so at FreeAgent, we're pretty well covered from a practice management integrations perspective. So obviously we integrate with Iris, and you've got your practice management within the elements piece, right? And then we integrate with what was Accountancy Manager is now Bright Manager. We integrate with Client Engager. What was Client Engager is now Engager App. So Hannah and the guys over there. We also recently integrated with Uku as well, which is another newbie on the UK market. And historically, we did integrate with Centre, which obviously became part of Iris as well. So we're quite well covered from the key market players. I think we've reached nope, people are still going on this one. We've got about half. You got 10 more seconds, folks. And then I'm going to jump onto the poll results. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There we go. Somewhat confident, the overall winner. Very confident, 6%. Good. Pleased for you. Excellent. Not confident at all. Nice. Don't know. No one says I think the press will close down. Not applicable. Don't expect it to be impacted by it. And other, 2%. Interesting. Good. I'm glad people are somewhat confident, because that is a good place to be, I think. There's still plenty of time, but we do need to be thinking about it. Final poll here. So would you like us to get in touch with more information about becoming a FreeAgent partner? Yes, please. No, thanks. I'm already a FreeAgent partner. Would love to hear from my account manager. Again, this will just be someone who will be able to get in touch with you and give you the heads up on what's going on at FreeAgent. We get a lot of good feedback on how our teams interact with our customers and potential customers on the basis of not being particularly pushy. We will tell you when a client is not a good fit for FreeAgent. We don't want you putting 50-person manufacturing businesses on FreeAgent, because it's not the right tool for that. But your dog walkers, your party planners, your architects, your dentists, your contractors, your side hustles, Shopify sellers, like there's tons of those smaller sort of, micro to small businesses that will work well for FreeAgent, and we're really starting to see shifts in practices going from, like, we used and other pieces of software for our main tools. They become quite expensive and a bit complicated. So actually now we're sort of starting to move away from that, and actually the FreeAgent piece is becoming the predominant practice piece rather than the extras. So cool. A few more seconds for those folks on this poll, and then I'll jump on to the final question, which we will rattle through very quickly. And then we'll close things out, go onto the webinar, and try and stick to roughly about the time. So, how do we best tackle process improvements? What are the best tools available? So, Steve, your just bullet point thoughts on this one, mate, and we'll close out with this as our final question.
Yeah, I think the process improvement is a really important one. I always kind of think of it as there are 3 steps here, right? So one is you need to kind of map out what you're already doing. Most firms that I speak to haven't got a clue what their exact process is. They know a part of it, but not the complete piece. First bit is go work with all your staff and write down, here's everything that we do today. Second part then is overlay which tools you use for that. And then look at the third part is which of those integrate today. go speak to your vendor then around, can I integrate this piece with this? And you'll often find that, yeah, you can, you just haven't enabled it.
Yeah.
And then that
Oh
means
yeah, that is definitely the case. Yep.
It's phenomenal, right? And just to put a quick stat out there, so we do something called a practice health check. For our Iris customers, we'll go and do this mapping process and kind of say, look, here you go, this is what it looks like. You then ask someone, are they using all these different bits of software within Iris and the features and functions? Iris, I'm not going to get away with not saying it. Iris is an expensive piece of kit. It is, but it's because it can do so much. But when you go look at what people are using, only 14% of the functionality on average is used. And that's just one piece of software. Now put that across everything that's across your base. So go speak to your vendors about what can you do more or connect to improve your process, because it's not going to cost you anything to go and do that. That's just turning on functionality you've probably already got. For me, that's probably the best thing someone can do, either tactically in the short term, but also to lead them for strategic advice in the future.
Excellent advice. Gareth, your thoughts?
I think for me, it's for accountancy practice would be to get your team members involved. The ones that are on the ground are at different stages of what they actually do within the software. Because if you're making it from a sort of a top-down decision, which is then pushed upon people that are using this software day to day, then it's not going to be as warmly received as it is. Whether those people that are working day to day in it, they should be involved in that decision, and that will give you the most meaningful choice of software to push into those processes that you want to improve.
Absolutely. I think I would add, you want to know where you're going, right? You don't want to know where does the practice want to get to, like what's the ultimate sort of source of the river that we're all kind of aiming to. Our good friend Lucy talks about this a lot, having your big, hairy, audacious goal and going after it. And then once you've got that goal, then all the rest of the decisions seem to be much more straightforward, because they either align to that, getting towards that goal, or they don't. And therefore, you're not drifting so much. So having that goal, that vision, our good friend Will talks about, the two things practices struggle with the most. He's worked with hundreds, thousands of practices, is vision and pricing. They're the two things. And if you know where you're going, then you can have those conversations with ultimate confidence that you're explaining to your staff, look, this is where we want to get to, right? This is our bus that we're on. Are you on this bus or not? These are the things that need to happen in order for this to be the case. And, here's what the benefit for that is for you, which ultimately probably means you're going to have a slightly more comfortable working environment, because your technology should be doing some of the heavy lifting. For price right, then you won't have to deal with as many clients and all that kind of stuff. So it's always the people. That is almost always the I don't want to use the word problem, but that's always the thing that needs to be tackled. And you need to say it, and you need to say it again, and you need to say it again, and you need to say it again, and you need to say it again. And by the time you get bored of saying it, they're still probably not quite there to say it again and again and again. And it needs to become part of the fabric of what you do every day. Because if you just say it once and then your behaviours as the firm owner or the senior leaders within the firm don't back up, this is where we're going, then people do what I do when I was in practice, which was someone puts something in front of me and I'm like, yeah, I'll wait till I hear it again. No, I'll wait till I hear it again. And now I'm going to start mobilizing, because I know it's not going away. It's going to be something that is going to stick around and something that I need to kind of get behind. And then once I'm behind it, then I'm behind it. But I just want to make sure that this isn't going to be something that I'm going to chunk a load of time into and isn't going to yield results. So I couldn't say more than the people. The tools are there to enable the people rather than they're not the ones driving the bus, right? So I have put in the attendee chat a link to our integrations page. Please do jump on there and have a look at Xenon and Iris and all of our integrations. We've been working really hard over the course of the last 18 months, and that's not going to stop. We've got a whole bunch of stuff, and so if you would like to connect with Steve or you'd like to connect with Gareth, they're both prevalent on LinkedIn. If you want to check your profiles in there, see Steve's done it already. Gareth, you want to pop your link in there to Xenon, to Iris, and to your personal profiles as well. That would be great. We're slightly over time, so I'm just having a quick look at some of the questions that have come through, and we've actually covered them off, and there hasn't been a bunch of questions, but lots of people have stayed on pretty much to the end. So what we are going to do is we're going to skip over the Q&A. Just a little reminder for folks, we like to put this in front of people. So we have an accounting and bookkeeping community, which is powered by our friends at ProNation, Lucy, Will, and to a lesser extent, Martin. So Lucy Cohen and Will Farnell are both firm owners. They are both extremely knowledgeable and extremely generous with their time and their insights. And our community is open to FreeAgent Bronze partners and above. So if you would like to join the community, it's a safe space run by ProNation, not run by us, to talk about practice problems, talk about questions that you've got. There's a monthly call that they host as a sort of like someone described it as group therapy yesterday. But Will and Lucy just open the doors to their firms and their knowledges and their experiences and just help our partners to really kind of like further their practices and just learn and grow from each other in collaboration. So I'll leave that up there for a few seconds. Bronze partner, if you're not sure whether you're bronze, that's 10 clients. We do have a bit of confusion around that occasionally. So yeah, scan that QR code, jump on, and you'll be approved if you're a FreeAgent partner and you're bronze level. And then we shall jump through into the thank yous and the live demo in a second. So firstly, I want to thank the audience. The attendee numbers have stayed pretty steady the whole way through, so that is hugely grateful for you for your time and attention. I'm really hopeful that you learned something today, or it's given you something to think about, a new angle on something, a new integration to go and explore, a new conversation to have with your team. A few friendly faces in there. Fozzie has done a couple of webinars with us before. She's really cool. So thank you for your ongoing support. So thanks for our audience. Thanks to everybody in FreeAgent who helps to put these on. I am simply the gun for hire who turns up and reads through the slides and tries to make things sound interesting. There's a whole ton of work that goes on to make these, run as smoothly as they do, and I can't claim any credit for that. So our design team, our comms team, our events team, huge thank you to everybody there. Thanks to Robbie for running the chat box, and thanks to Mark specifically for putting this webinar on. It's been a good success, I think. But mainly my thanks go to Steve and to Gareth for giving up their time today to help facilitate this conversation. Steve, with his data insights as well, have proven really useful talking points for us to kind of gather around. As I said at the beginning, they are both titans of our space, so we're very lucky to have them here. So huge thanks to you, gentlemen, and I look forward to treading the boards with you again in the future. We are going to go into a short 5-10 minute look at FreeAgent. So for those of you that are already existing FreeAgent partners and don't want to stick around, you are more than welcome to drop off, and also the panelists, you are able to drop off as well if you don't want to stick around and have a quick look at FreeAgent. So thank you again, and you'll forgive me while I just share my screen. So I think I'm doing the demo, so if you just bear with me a second. Unless anybody tells me in the team chat otherwise. I can't see anybody else is on there. Sometimes we get other folks in to do it. So, right. There we go. So now then, okay. So how do I share my screen? So that'll be the big button at the top that says share screen tone. There we go. Could somebody in the chat just confirm that you can see my like FreeAgent dashboard, green stripe across the top, list of clients? Excellent. I assume that Robbie is that all good is for that, and I will proceed on that basis. Excellent. Right, just 5 or 10 minutes quickly on FreeAgent and how we roll here. So this is the accounting dashboards. This is where we log in. We get to see, what's going on. Our list of clients tells us if they're a free NatWest license or not. And then we've got a little bunch of alerts here where you can, sort of director's loan goes above a certain amount. Similar to Xenon, but nowhere near as sophisticated. These types of stuff just gives you little notes about what's going on. What we're going to do, we're going to jump straight into a client here. Let's go into Adventure Beast. I'll give you a quick look around. So you notice there, product update, smart capture for bills. Fantastic. That is, you know, being able to do bills on our data capture app. Just the overview. So you get nice sort of profit and loss. And I fiddled around with this. So when you get it, looks more like this when it originates. So that sits there and that sits behind there. So the P&L tells you what's been going on in the year. But I really like the tax timeline. So this is something that's kind of pretty much unique to FreeAgent. Just gives you reminders about all of your corporation tax, your income tax, your VAT, and you are able to filter this now. So if there's one you want to switch off, you can switch it off. If you want to switch off the amounts, you can switch those off as well. If you've got some client that's got something sort of funny going on within there. And then what we're going to do is just jump straight to banking, because that's the kind of heartbeat of FreeAgent. So let's jump into banking and have just a quick look around how we explain transactions within FreeAgent. So you will see here that we've got not the red wall of death as I talked about earlier, but nice green transactions here which show all of the transactions that are have been explained within FreeAgent. So if I click into one of these, it will tell me what type of payment it was, what the VAT rate was, what category it goes to. Then you'll notice we've got a little unexplained tab here, so we can jump into unexplained, and then that will tell you, look, I've got a transaction here that I've split, but there's still some that's outstanding. And now can I order by description, which I can now. So you'll notice that I can tick on the various different ones. And if there was a whole bunch of them there were alphabetically the same, then I can order them all together. Why is it graying them out? So it grays out. You can only add money ins together and money outs together. So if I want to add these last three ones there, and then I can do those, and then I can come across here and go, right, okay, let's explain those to climbing equipment, etc. What you'll notice as well, I'll leave it on this one actually. So what you have here is this for approval tab. And what happens on the for approval tab is once you log in and start bringing your transactions in through from the bank, what FreeAgent then does is after a while, if you've got guess switched on, it starts to guess where the transactions go based on your previous behavior, but also based on the behavior of FreeAgent users as a whole. So that is really useful for a number of reasons, but ultimately what it does is it settles on around about 60% of your transactions will get approved by FreeAgent automatically, or get assigned by FreeAgent automatically, and that will represent about a 93% accuracy rate, depending on, it fluctuates slightly. But so then what will happen then when you log into all transactions is you'll see a whole bunch of ones that are already explained, which is great, because then it means that the heavy lifting is being done by the machines rather than by you, and it also gives you a nice sort of structure and framework to work around. Just a quick look at our reports, and we'll quick look at smart capture, and then we'll move on. So those of you that have been using FreeAgent for some time will have noticed that this has notably improved this. So we've now got a bank rec, which we didn't used to have. We've now got an audit trail, which we didn't used to have. And my good pal Stu product, they've added a bunch of extra things onto the reports that have given, I think I go to debtors. So there's a bunch of extra sort of like totals and different bits and pieces that you can age by due date on, and all these sorts of things. So we're going through this project at the moment to improve our reporting and to give you a whole bunch of extra sort of flexibility and options in terms of how you operate the FreeAgent reporting. And then if we go to files and smart capture, you'll notice here that we've got this opportunity now under smart capture where we can drag and drop files in. So if they send us a Dropbox of files, we can just drop them in there, and then it will then start to pull through these transactions here. That so if I click on that one, so that's pulled that through. It's creating. I can create a bill, or I can create an expense, or it will attach it to a approved transaction here, and it's pulled through the amounts, pulled through the receipts as well. So that is just a quick whistle-stop tour, and we've still got most of you on, so that's a good sign. And what I will do is I'll just give you one final poll. So for those of you that have been holding out and saying, yeah, do you know what, I'm not quite sure if I want to speak to FreeAgent. I'd like to wait and see the demo at the end. So you've had the demo now, and this is a final poll, and we'll close down after this one. So if you're an accountant bookkeeper in practice would like one-to-one consultation to learn even more about how FreeAgent can help your practice, then please click yes. And I will let this run for a minute or two. Thank you again, everybody, for your attendances, and I do urge you to get in touch if you would like to, because we are more than happy to help with your bookkeeping and accounting needs. There we go. Cool. See, the numbers are rising now, which is great. Cool. I'll just give everyone a few more seconds to just to finalize that. So the numbers are still moving, and then we will finish the webinar. You're welcome, Riaz. You're welcome, Declan. You're welcome, Pauline. You're welcome, Gareth. Not different Gareth. Alexandra, David, Yash, Ian. Excellent. All those people saying yes, you can see. So you are more than welcome. Hopefully it was useful. Cully, Leslie, Matthew, yeah. Cool. Thank you, Robbie, for all the links and all the QR codes. That's great. Right, that number has stopped moving, so we are going to end there. Finally, thank you again, and there's no polite way of doing this other than for me to just kick everybody out, so see you soon. Bye-bye.